This lecture is a discussion of empiricist philosophy, and we begin with looking at the life and philosophy of John Locke. His date 1632 to 1704. Locke set out to inquire into the origin and certainty and extent of human knowledge. Of course, there was the rise of science at that time. There was the argument that Descartes had put forward of innate ideas, and he was responding directly to Descartes. Locke's theory of knowledge said there were no innate ideas, and his argument against Descartes was this: if an idea is truly in one's mind, then it must be understood. And he said some humans do not understand these ideas, and he gives the example of the law of non-contradiction. And that, for example, may mean that you are either watching this video or you are not watching this video, and you can't be doing both at the same time. That's the law of non-contradiction. So he says, since some humans do not understand these ideas, they cannot be in the minds, and these ideas thus are not innate. Locke then argues that all ideas come from experience. All ideas are objects of thinking and come from sensation, which are sensible qualities that are conveyed to the mind, and reflection, which includes perception, thinking, doubting, believing, reasoning, knowing, and willing. The mind at birth is a tabula rasa, or a blank slate. He says, we have simple ideas. They originate in any one particular sense, and they cannot be further broken down. So, for example, we have a sensation of hot, of blue, of sticky, of red, of green. And complex ideas are combinations of simple ideas. The key assumption here, though, is that objects do exist apart from our perceptions. And if you recall, Descartes never made this assumption. So Locke is a dogmatist. He assumes objects exist apart from our perceptions and that they have primary qualities. That means solidity, extension, figure, and motion. And then something called secondary qualities, and that would be taste and color. And he says while these are caused by the real features of the object, these secondary qualities only exist in the person's mind. It's important to understand Locke's state of nature in comparison with the state of nature that Hobbes describes. Locke says that in the state of nature there is morality, and that there are certain God-given natural rights: life, liberty, health, and possessions. Does this language sound familiar to you? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. One can claim property by mixing one's labor with resources. And you can accumulate as much property as you can mix your labor with, as long as it does not spoil in the accumulation, as long as enough has been left for others, and as long as the accumulation of this property is not harmful to others. The measure of the state's value, and compare this now to the notion of Aristotle. Aristotle said that the measure of the legitimacy of the state was whether it governed in the interests of the whole group. Well, here the legitimacy of the state is how well does the state protect the natural rights of the individual. George Berkeley was another empiricist. His dates 1685 to 1753. Berkeley attacks Locke's distinction between primary and secondary qualities. He says, to be is to be perceived. That is, even the primary qualities are within the person's mind. The only way we can know the size, shape, and dimensionality of an object is by seeing and feeling it. He says, we never sense space nor magnitude. We only have different perceptions of things when we see them in perspective. We do not see distance. It is only suggested by our experience. In other words, everything, all perceptions are perceptions within a person's mind. And he says substance apart from perception was nothing. Matter is a meaningless term. Gravity, force, and causality are clusters of ideas based on sensation. Well, this proves to be a bit of a dilemma. For when I deny sensible things, do you think that there's a possibility that if everyone in a room closed their eyes, that existence would go out of existence forever? Well, he says no. He says, when I deny sensible things and existence out of the mind, I do not mean my mind in particular, but all minds. And what he is saying, that it is plain they have an existence exterior to my mind, since I find them by experience to be independent of it. The reason that all things do not go out of existence when I close my eyes, according to Berkeley, is because these things are in the mind of God's eye. He says, there is therefore some other mind wherein they exist during the intervals between the time of my perceiving them. Thus, Berkeley eliminates the middleman, that is, the object, between a person's idea and the mind of God. David Hume was a radical empiricist. His dates from 1711 to 1776. He separated knowledge into two camps. He said there was analytic truths, relations of ideas that are tautological, which means they provide no new information about the world. And then he said the other camp was synthetic truths, and these are matters of fact that can correctly describe reality, and these are after experience, or a posteriori. The most important thing that Hume describes is the notion of causality. Now, his main claim was that if a sensation cannot be traced back to an original sensory data, it is nonsense. Let's take, for example, something in my hand which I'm about to drop. Now, if I drop this on the desk, it's going to make a loud bang. Well, you heard the bang, but you didn't see the causality, did you? You didn't hear the causality, did you? He says that causality is not a perception and cannot be traced to original sensory data. Causality is nonsense. Well, with this radical view, the whole purpose of science is thrown into a quandary. The purpose of science is to find out causes and effects, and it was through observation that scientists were doing this. But now Hume says that radically Accepting observation throws out the whole notion of causality. He threw out the notion of science. Well, this leaves philosophy in a real quandary. If synthetic ideas can't be traced back to sensory data and causality is nonsense, then what is science to do? The problem is solved by a later philosopher. His name is Immanuel Kant. What did Hume think about God? We don't have sensory perception of God. Well, some say he was an atheist. He denies it. But he says this: once he puts down his pen, he claims that he reverts to the unfounded beliefs of humanity, and perhaps included in this is the belief in God.